Welcome to this joint Royal Television Society and Screen Skills discussion, the future of unscripted production, people, place and amazing programmes. We're also here to mark the launch of Screen Skills' new unscripted TV skills fund. That's quite difficult to say, isn't it? Which has an amazing ambition of investing £3 million a year in skills and training by 2024. It's a joint broadcaster producer initiative. The BBC and Channel 4 are founding investors, and along with Pact, Sky, A&E Networks and Discovery, there's a lot of people on board and a lot of support for this new money. Now, this session really isn't about the detail of the fund. I'll tell you how you can find out about that later. And I know some of you in the audience will already have been talking to Screen Skills in the last few weeks about how they might get involved. But we're really here to explore what the industry needs to meet the future demands on production, and how we can strengthen the unscripted sector right across the full range of genres, from docs to fact ent to support and entertainment. And really importantly, how can we build a sustainable and bigger pool of talent in the nations and regions? Now, we have a stellar and very experienced panel to share their views, so let me introduce them first. We have Sinead Rocks. Hello, Sinead, Managing Director of Nations and Regions at Channel 4, and the new chair of the steering group, which will oversee the strategic objectives and the operations of this fund. Afternoon, Sinead. We have Alan Clement. So we've got Sinead in Leeds. We've got a good spread across the UK, the nations and regions. We've got Sinead in Leeds, and then we've got Alan Clements. Hello, Alan, up in Glasgow, MD of Two Rivers Media, who'll be on the working group looking at craft and tech skills for this new fund. And then down in London, we have Sam Lawrence. Hello, Sam, MD of Monkey Kingdom, also on the steering group of the fund and been very creation of the fund. So let's kick off really, and I'm going to start with Sinead, if that's all right. Sinead, we've got lots of funds and training initiatives. We've all put our heart and soul into them in many years. Now, you're chairing this new one. What do you really hope? What do you hope in your heart of hearts that we can achieve with this fund that we haven't been able to achieve before?
I genuinely think, Lynn, that this has the potential to be the game changer. I mean, it's not giving away any trade secrets to say it's taken a long time to get to this point, launch day, June the 1st. And I think that's because everyone coming to the table to thrash out the detail of it was so passionate about what they wanted from it, and everyone really was invested in putting the time into getting it right so that it could prove to be that long-term intervention that the sector really needs. I think from a Channel 4 point of view, we really thought that it was worth putting the work in because the desire for everyone to come together to collaborate, to do something really significant to address skills gaps right across the UK, and especially with a focus in the nations and regions, is absolutely aligned with our own strategy. The fact that it's a collaboration, that the broadcasters are on board with the producers, and that we can all then combine our efforts to have the most impact, that was another massive tick for us. And the fact that it's industry-led, it's really going to be using evidence to identify skills gaps and to make sure that the right interventions are being considered. So, I mean, there's a lot of brilliant training initiatives across the UK. What I think we're doing with this one is absolutely recognizing the strength of coming together, recognizing that more can be achieved when we're not duplicating effort and when we're really very focused and very targeted. And, you know, it will take time for everything to get up and running and to get off the ground, but I have never quite seen this amount of intent behind something, and I think that's what makes the difference.
That sounds really exciting. So Alan, up in Scotland then, so I mean, do you feel that too? Do you feel the intent? Do you feel the sort of real collaborative spirit of this fund?
Yes, very much so, and delighted to be here on its launch day. And I would echo everything that Sinead has just said. I think it's really important, industry-led, very practical, very focused. But I would add two other things. I think it's really long-term planning, which is what we need. And the focus in the nations and regions, particularly that the broadcasters have said all their funds should be directed towards the nations regions, is a really important signal, really important indicator of how this should progress. And maybe we'll see a situation for the generation to come that they can build careers and lives outside of London. And great if they want to go to London, but they won't feel obliged to go to London in order to advance their careers. And that would be a fantastic outcome of this fund.
That's great. So Sam, down in London, you've been involved in a lot of the thinking and the the working out of this fund. And of course, nations and regions need a lot of tender loving care, actually, and they need a lot of support to build them. But it's not simply about the nations and regions, is it?
No, and I think, we've had lots of discussions around, kind of a lot of production companies are London based, might have, other offices and other arms in the nations and regions. But, if the independent production companies in London are going to put money into the fund, then what are they going to get out of it as well? So, so I think it's a really sort of fine balance. And wholly committed to putting money into the nations and regions, because I think that just opens up just the production community, full stop, and I think that benefits all of us. And I think it really, kind of in aiding nations and regions, I think it absolutely aids all of our diversity and inclusion work as well, because I think we're just, as I say, opening up the production community and the production world. And, we need a huge talent pool, across the country. And I think this is really going to help. But I think the one thing we do need to remember is that, kind of, this isn't going to be a one-stop shop immediately. As you say, it's taken a lot of time to get here, and it's amazing that we've got here, and totally echo what Sinead and Anne say. I think we've, it really did need all of us to come together as one, kind of, production community, broadcasters and indies alike. And we're going to put, we will put a lot of money into this fund, and we will be able to deliver a lot of training and help a lot of people. And I think it will really help, kind of level that playing field for freelancers as well, because that's always quite a tricky one, kind of you're doing a job for 3 months here and there, and how do you get trained and when do you do that training? So hopefully we're really going to open it up to a lot of people. So hopefully freelancers feel, kind of that they get looked after, and us as indies have got amazing people coming through our books, and therefore we make amazing shows for the broadcasters. So hopefully on June the 1st, very sunny day, it's a win-win situation for all of us.
Yeah, that sounds great. So let's just talk about the landscape then, because the UK is having the most fantastic purple patch and boom in content production, global content production, and that has changed in the last few years. And it's a very exciting career for people to join and to establish. So how do you think it has changed, and where do you think it's going? I mean, you're all very experienced. You know the landscape. Sinead, what do you think? Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years? Bigger, better, needing more people?
Well, yes, and yes. I mean, yeah, you have to be sitting here today hoping for the best and hoping for continued growth for the UK's creative industries as a whole. Channel 4. For all the UK, we've opened up our bases in Glasgow and Bristol. We'll be moving into our permanent HQ in Leeds this summer. For us, this is a win-win situation. We want to be making content that better reflects the UK, and we realise that the best way to do that is to have people making the programmes and suggesting the ideas from all across the UK, and it is back to that inclusion and diversity piece. I think that in the world of the streamers, British content is always going to be very important. Content from across the UK is always going to be very important. And I think that, when we've been thinking about our own training and skills agenda, we think that, we're going to need more and more people with new skills coming onto the market all the time, the traditional skills as well. So training has probably never been more important. We feel like we're on the precipice, really, and we want to grow, and we want to make the nations and regions piece work to the best of its ability. So yes, that's, being optimistic. Training and skills is a vital part of that equation.
Sort of what talent do we really need to develop then, Alan? Where would you say the gaps are in Scotland? What have you got more than you need of in Scotland, if that's possible, and not enough of? And is that reflected across the other nations and regions?
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but I'd like to pick up maybe on Sinead's point there, because I think there are two massive developments in our industry that are happening right now and running in parallel that are going to shape the needs that we're going to have in training. The first is an extraordinary consolidation in the international industry. So you saw even in the last 2 weeks of Amazon buying MGM and Time Warner combining with Discovery. And what that's actually doing is, even though there's a boom in content, as Sinead says, it's narrowing the number of buyers, because you get people who are buying for their streamers, but also their cable channels, their online everything. And so what they want is much bigger and better projects. So the knock-on effect of that is effectively, and I'm sure Sam will echo this, you're effectively in pre-production pitching a show. You know, when you look at the sizzles, the casting, everything you have to do to pitch a show, you might as well be making the show. And so you need people with design skills for decks and editing skills for sizzles. So the nature of the market is changing the nature of the skills. They also want to own everything, which means it's high risk and high reward, because if you fail, all that investment is not going to result in you owning IP. So again, you don't get many chances to get it right, and you have to get it absolutely right. And as alongside that, in parallel, is this move to the nations and regions. So because I'm so old, I have actually lived through at least 3 waves of, we're definitely moving to the nations and regions, but this time it is real, and more important, it's irreversible. And so the knock-on effect of that is we're going to have to train people, instead of importing people, we'll have to train people locally who can compete, because the broadcasters go, we love you to do this, and by the way, it's a really important to Nations and Regions Commission, but actually, could you do this director from Hampstead? And you're going, well, then it's not a nation. So all those discussions have to stop, and they have to trust that we have the skills in the nations and regions. But in order to have that trust, we have to have the skills. And so those two things are happening in parallel. So the knock-on effect is to come, sorry, a very long digression from your question. The knock-on effect is there are shortages on everything from production accountants who can handle big projects, to editors who can cut feature documentaries, for example, because there's never been such a massive marketplace for that. So it's changing constantly for us, and for production companies, it's trying to keep ahead of those two massive curves.
So this fund isn't about entry level. This fund is actually directly about how you continue to enhance and develop your career, so you can meet those bigger demands, because as you were saying, there are bigger demands, aren't there? So it's about joining getting your foot in, but then continuous training and development, so you're at international level, not just UK level. Is that right?
100%. Yeah, so you could have an editor. I mean, there's a big, for example, there's a huge features industry in Scotland, from location through all the Raise the Roof programs to our own Escape to the Chateau. So there's plenty of people who've experience of that. But that doesn't mean you can cut a 90-minute feature doc just because you've been an editor on those shows. And you might have that ambition, quite rightly. So we hope that this scheme will be brilliant at moving people's skills on, rather than not an entry level, but moving them up within the industry.
So, Sinead, just to come back to you, I'm not ignoring you, Sam, just to come back to you on that. So how are we actually going to do that in the regions? If the training is going to be delivered in the regions as well, not just the money coming from regional broadcasters, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make sure that the regions have the people that can actually skill the sort of more junior members of staff up to that international level? How are we going to do that?
Well, a lot like so much of our industry, an awful lot of training has been centralized to London over the past few years, and there's some brilliant training providers outside of London. We do a lot with TRC in Alan's neck of the woods, but we need more of them. So another thing that needs to come from this fund is a greater proliferation and diversity of trainers right across the UK. Alan kind of got it right, though. Really, it really clicked in my brain when he said it. This is not a story about training on its own. It has to go hand in hand with the commissions for nations and regions, people, freelancers, crews, to truly grow their careers. We need returnable business coming from all different parts of the country. And it is about the commissioning story going hand in hand with the training piece. Alan used the word trust, and that's absolutely right. And that, I think, is at the heart of this. I think one of the big appeals of this fund for Channel 4 was the fact that the training would be done in the nations and regions, and you won't always have to go down to London to top up your skills. It's an important message as much as anything else. So I think there's work. Sam said it earlier, this is a long game. We need more people outside of London to be in the training game and to develop skills to the highest possible level. But we think that this is absolutely the right way to go about it.
So so where are our gaps then? Where do you think people should be mindful about developing their skills? So Sam, what's there a real shortage of in London at the moment? Because that very often is the beginning of we've got shortage in the nations and regions. What are you all fighting over? What indies?
Well, I mean, I have to say at the moment, and this is a hopefully good news story. I think we're all fighting over absolutely everybody at every level, because coming off the back of COVID, the industry is really back up and running very, very, very quickly. So we're struggling across the board at the moment. So we've got an office in Manchester as well, but across the board, we literally can't hire people anymore. I mean, it's actually getting to the point of being quite scary. We had a conversation in the office at the back end of last week going, my God, if we win any more work, I'm not sure we'll be able to deliver it this year, because actually everyone's now booked up, which I'm delighted about on one hand, because that's exactly where we need to be. But I mean, exec producers, series producers, I think there's a real shortage of. I definitely find that, I think regionally as well, is a problem. I think, kind of on the production management side, line producers, production managers, production coordinators, can't hire a production coordinator for love nor money. And we're in a silly situation as well at the moment, which is, it's a bit like buying a house and you keep being gazumped. So all of my teams keep coming to me going, well, I booked such and such and such and such, but so-and-so's come, they've got a longer contract, they're going to give them a promotion, they're going to give them more money. And it's like, and there's nothing we can do about it, because we're all sort of fighting each other. And I think the Skills Fund, I hope, will help with that, because I think we are looking to sort of put a bit of a sort of production roadmap within it to sort of to really, kind of inform people and freelancers, kind of what skills are required for each job, which I think is really important, because you kind of if anyone actually sort of turned around to an AP and said, well, what skills do you need to be an AP? And lots of people would say lots of different things, because everyone's had different journeys and different jobs. So I think we can help by kind of actually, to be a AP or a line producer, wherever, you need to have these skills. And, to be a line producer, you need to have production managed X number of shows, all of that sort of stuff. And I think we can also try and really kind of just help with the sort of the gazumping and the rate matching and bettering, because in the end, that's not going to be great for any of us. And I think the other thing with that is that, kind of people who jump up too quickly, you don't want to then sort of fall down, because actually you haven't got all of those skills in order to do that job or the next job. And actually you need to do, I came up production management route. I stayed as a coordinator for years and years and years, because I never thought I'd be good enough to be a production manager, because it seemed quite a scary, responsible job. And so actually I really learnt my craft. And I know that's a very grandma thing to say these days, because I'm very old, but but actually we did used to take it a bit slower. And I know that's kind of not what this generation does, but I do think we need to just take a breath and go, actually it's a proper industry and it does require proper skills in order to make the amazing shows that we do, as Alan was saying, and Sinead, that we're going to put on the international stage, and we need to be really good at that, and everyone needs to play their part. So I think we can help with all of that, because I think there's a, you know, training and skills is such a funny area, and one that we have forgotten not forgotten, but we haven't been able to do or afford for a long time. So, you know, so I think it'll just make everybody stronger and better, and you know, so and you know, and create much. I mean, our content's amazing, obviously, but I think the content, you know, will be at an even higher level, which that feels exciting.
Yeah, it's Can I just spend a little bit of time talking about production coordinates, production management, as if you don't mind, because I know in Bristol, when I talk to my friends and colleagues in Indies, nobody can find a PC or a PM for love or money. They can't, and post-production skills are also at a premium in Bristol. But what is it, do you think, about production coordination and production management that doesn't seem to be as popular as skills that might be seen as more creative? Because it strikes me as, I mean, you know, I've made dozens and dozens of shows. I couldn't have done them and couldn't have made successful shows without being absolutely hand in glove with a production manager, you know, completely equitable in terms of and what you do on a production. So what is it? Because it strikes me as that there's a huge gap in that, but not so many people wanting to develop their careers in that space. Alan, what do you think? Is that the same in Scotland?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer, I'm sorry, to why that might be. And I think I would echo what Sam said about, I think sometimes people expect to advance really, really fast without I mean, if you get the budget wrong, the management of a budget wrong, that is catastrophic as making an editorial error. But I don't know why it's not is seen as glamorous. I don't have an answer to that. We definitely have to bring more people into it. And production, maybe it's because accountants are safety first, and working in a TV industry as a freelance is not as you know, being a partner in an accountancy firm, but there's a real shortage.
If I can add, I mean, I think the problem is I think that it doesn't feel as if it's as sexy as you know, as being creative and being on the editorial side, and yet it's absolutely essential. And I think it's a case of how it's perceived and how it's looked at. So you never find a production manager winning a BAFTA or an RTS, but you'll find all your editorial friends winning that and being put on the, you know, the strap line at the award ceremonies. And I think that's, you know, kind of, I think it doesn't feel quite fair. So you can see, well, of course I'm going to be a researcher and producer and director and series producer, because I'm going to win awards and I'm going to be put on this job and that job and the other. And, you know, actually, you know, kind of, you know, you very rarely do you get the broadcasters going, I want that production manager or line producer on that job, but you'll always you've got to have that exec or that SP. So I think it's just this, there's not quite the parity there. But again, I sound like such an eternal optimist, but I am currently. But I think coming off the back of COVID, I do think that I think there has been a real coming together in the production community and in the indie world. Of actually, we've shared all of that experience together. So in order to make a show during COVID times, during lockdown times, you know, editorial and production management have had to come together, and they've had to share the responsibility of what it means to make a show during a global pandemic and keep everybody safe and keep the content of such high quality. And it would be lovely to think that we could come off the back of that and actually go, well, how do we level that playing field, and how do we make production management exciting and feel like a real career, and actually that you can really progress? Because if you think as well, it's about progression. So you're a production manager, then you might become a production exec, then you become a head of production. There's not that many companies to have lots, you know, there aren't that many opportunities. So where do you go? So there's a slight ceiling. And it's actually, you know, can we think cleverly about that? Because, you know, as Sinead said, you can't make a show without you know, without decent production people, you know, they are the absolute sort of underbelly of it. So, you know, I think that we need to look at that and take and think about, you know, how we might readdress it.
Yeah, Sinead?
Everywhere I've ever worked in whatever part of the country, it's always been a conversation of why are there not enough production managers, and I think Sam's point about it's not the same career ladder that's so obvious is a key point. I think the lack of glamorizing it or giving it equity at things that like awards does and so on is a problem as well. I think historically it's been largely female dominated, and women often take time out of their careers at various times for other reasons, and I think that probably impacts things as well. I think this fund though is going to help address issues like this if we can put really exciting and focused and targeted training and really showcase the importance of production management. Then I think we can make an effort to sex it up. Can't believe I just said sex it up in relation to production management. I apologize.
No, I think we've got to hear that more and more and more about
Yeah.
sexing it up, actually, because it, you know, it strikes me as it can be an absolutely fantastic career and really creative, and even, you know, and much more creative as you work in a global market as well. But it hasn't got the right kind of rap, has it? So I suppose it's incumbent on all of us to say that this is a really meaningful, very powerful career to have in film and television, isn't it? So that's one thing that we're going to do, and I'm going to hold you to it, really. How are we going to sex up production coordination, production management, and running the books and running everything? How are we going to do that? Well, so how are we actually going to help our freelance friends and colleagues to have a really sustainable career? How can this fund do that? You know, how can you really sustain your career as a freelance? And after the last 18 months, you know, it's not a surprise if anybody says, I really don't want to do that anymore. I do not want to be a freelance because it has been so hard. So how are we going to move the dial? How are we going to change that with this fund as well?
Do you know, one of the things that's been really interesting about COVID is I think it's given people a much clearer idea of what they want out of life and where they want to be. So I'm seeing friends and colleagues moving where they live because they're presuming that the life will be more flexible in terms of location moving forwards. And I think this really plays into, sorry to keep going on about nations and regions, but I think it's an important part of this conversation. You mentioned sustainable careers. I think take that one step further. This is partly about how can you have a sustainable career in the city that you choose to live in. So my generation's one of the many generations that always had to go to London to advance careers. I've moved all around the UK for work, and there's less of an appetite to do that. And nor should there be. You know, having to go to London to grow your career is often one of the biggest barriers when it comes to socioeconomic diversity in our industry, and that's something we all want to change. So I think that there's a real opportunity here to let people have the career they want in the place that they live, something that I think will be more of a draw for people when, you know, if they've got choices about where they work, this is the kind of the thing that's going to, I think, tip the balance into you getting the really good people if you can give them that opportunity. Goes back to the earlier point, we need the returnable commissions to come from all parts of the UK in order to enable that to happen. So it's that symbiotic relationship between training and skills and commissioning that I think is key to all of this.
Does it feel like that as well in Scotland, Alan?
I would say I can answer in one word, which is work. If you want to sustain careers, it's returning commissions, that lets freelancers build their career. If you want training opportunities, the best training opportunities are provided when there's work there for the people to learn on. Always, it's great, there's fantastic courses. Sinead mentioned TRC, they do brilliant work here in Scotland, but what sustains careers and what sustains training is work. And that's the absolute core of it. And we can dance around it any way, which way you like, but that's the thing that's going to really change the dial.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few questions from the audience. If I will, whichever one of you wants to jump in on this, okay. Annick asks, how do we get more diversity off screen, as we know that is important to achieve greater diversity on screen? For example, how do we get more commissioners or production managers from marginalised backgrounds? Okay, who would like to take that? Sinead, I'm looking at you.
I think we need to work harder. I think that, you know, I'm not sure there's a single organization, whether it's a broadcaster or a production company in our industry, who doesn't have diversity targets and diversity initiatives. And I think that that's great, but every time you hit your goal and your target, you need to up it again, and you need to go further. You need to not expect people to come to you. You need to get out there. You need to be really trying to engage with the different communities that that maybe traditionally have not found our industry to be particularly welcoming, or maybe just not even an option. So that kind of thing's right at the heart of 4Skills, which is Channel 4's training and skills strategy. It's about getting out there and not waiting for people to come to you, but it's about being bloody proactive. It really is. Our industry survival really depends on us having an inclusive and diverse workforce that represents every part of the UK. That's what we need in our commissioning teams. That's what we need in our programme makers. But it's not going to happen by magic. It is absolute, hard work on everyone's behalf, and you just can't afford to take your foot off the gas.
And is there something about, actually, you just said there that our industry wasn't particularly welcoming. It is much more welcoming, I think, for people to get a foothold now. But do you think it's as welcoming inside in terms of retention to keeping diversity and inclusion going once you're actually got a job in the industry? Do you think we should be doing more about that?
I remember a few years ago looking at a piece of work that showed we were very good at attracting those entry-level positions, but the retention was a problem. I think that's as much to do with career ladders as anything else. There was not necessarily, there was so much effort going into those entry-level opportunities. We'd forgotten to do the next steps in that career path journey. Listen, everyone's going to have a different experience, and I hope that we will get that retention piece right. And I hope that that we can remove barriers that exist just as and when they come up. I mean, I think one of the big barriers is still getting that foot in the door. You know, there's still parts of our industry where you are expected to work for free, or where you are expected to come in via elongated work experience or internships. If you are from a lower socioeconomic background, for example, that just might not be possible. So there's always more that we can do.
There is something, isn't there, about the clarity, as you were saying, Sam, about actually the job role and the job description and how you do progress.
Yeah, I think so, because I think that because I think, you know, it's kind of, it is the retention, and it is the nurturing and the bringing on, and you know, it's kind of, it's one of those things that's just so hard, which isn't it, because we sort of don't really have the time, the money, the resource to do that. And actually, I think, you know, kind of the fund is going to really help push that, because as I said earlier, it's a sort of level playing field, which will be much easier for freelancers to access that. And also it'd be much easier for us as, you know, indies to kind of talk about exactly what we expect, you know, kind of people, you know, at different levels, you know, kind of whether working at AP or producer. I think as well, you know, the drive into the nations and regions with this fund is just going to help, full stop. Because I think, you know, it's kind of, you know, I had to move from Birmingham to London because it's the only way I was going to get into telly. No one helped me get in. You know, it's kind of like, you know, I got into a load of debt coming down to London to do that. It's like, well, why do we have to? You know, I could have got, you know, hope now I would get a job in Birmingham. We can open up, you know, it's kind of, it's much, you know, it's going to be, you know, it does make it, you know, a little easier. And I think, you know, as Sinead said, and I bang on about it all the time, you know, whatever we do is like, we can always do better. So, you know, kind of, you know, we've been doing loads of work around diversity and inclusion here at Monkey, and, you know, and it's going really well, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done, but it's nowhere near enough. nowhere near enough. So we need to do way more. And it's, you know, and it is, I think, you know, I joke, it's like, you know, the broadcaster gives us a target. Well, I don't want to just hit that target. I want to exceed that target, because that's the only way we're ever going to move the needle. But then we come back in times like this, post-COVID, where there's like a glut of work and everybody's booked. It's kind of like, actually, you know, kind of, we're, you know, in terms of diversity inclusion, we're going after, you know, still a small pool, a talent pool. So actually what we need to do is we just need to keep widening that out. And the other thing I think around it is that, you know, kind of, we need to stop going, well, you know, has that person got all the experience they need to do this job? Actually, because, you know, our friend over here who probably looks like me and talks like me, oh, I know that they can definitely do it. Actually, we need to change that narrative. And what the question we need to go is, okay, actually, I do think this person over here can do this job, but actually they haven't done X, Y, and Z. So what we'll do is we can put in this or this extra support or resource in order to help them achieve being able to do that job. Because I think, you know, we all work to tight budgets and tight schedules, and, you know, kind of, we want to be able to deliver. And so that makes us a little, you know, kind of risk averse in taking chances on some people who might not have the absolute, you know, kind of, you know, grade A perfect CV for that job. And that's where we need to go, no, how we can do this, and that person has got that, so they can definitely do that. And we might just have to think differently about how we kind of support them. So I think that, you know, again, just keep pushing and keep talking about it, and actually less talking and more action.
Okay, more action. Here's a question then about more action. Question from TH Gray. Do you envisage, okay, seeing mature candidates retraining and returning to play a role in filling the skills gaps? So we're not just talking about new and sort of new entry-level talent, but mature gap. Have you got anything against that? People with slightly mature view?
Not me.
No.
I've grown up.
Yeah, no.
I love someone who's as old as me.
I didn't look anywhere. Did you see? I didn't look anywhere.
I think I caught your eye, definitely. Like, you know. But no, I think that's good. I think we, particularly amongst women, we lose women out of the industry. As Sinead said, a lot of them don't return because they find we're not a very flexible working. We don't offer flexible working very often, and it is difficult on a production that's all systems go. So I completely understand that. But I also think I think if we work on social and economic exclusion or inclusion now, as it's known, and regional diversity, stop banging on about that. I think that rising tide would lift a lot of boats in terms of ethnicity, in terms of gender, and I think that's a really, really important agenda for the industry. But I do think that's true. Why would you not take on a mature person for an entry-level job if they're retraining and they're in a different industry? And we would definitely look at that. We took on my last job, we took on a print journalist in an entry-level job who had 20 years of journalistic experience, and he was brilliant.
There you are. That's a good answer. TH Gray, there you are. You got your answer. So don't be put off if the question was for you. Don't be put off on applying for these jobs. Okay, we've got another question from the floor. Is there a role for universities to provide career development, higher level training in the regions? That's from Stephanie Farmer.
Yes, I'm guessing. Again, we've had links, certainly for us. We sponsor I sponsor a student, Edinburgh Napier, in the Journalism and Television Centre there. We have links to the University of Stirling's Masters programme, which is very focused on development for returning feature series, which obviously, again, a big priority for broadcasters out of Scotland. So yeah, I do think there's, and also with the University of Western Scotland. So we have links all over, and I do think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't drilled down into the detail yet, have you, about who's actually going to deliver these training and CPD and development in the regions? It could be universities, could be FE colleges, could be a whole range of different training providers, couldn't it? Yeah, hang on. Okay, so Screen Skills are actually saying that. They've got something called the Screen Skills Select, where industry practitioners go in and assess college and Screen Skills related courses and identify the most relevant to working in the industry. Yeah, they've been doing that for a very long time. This is something slightly different though, this fund, isn't it? Because you'll be looking for providers depending on where the skills gaps are. Is that right? And how long is that going to take, Sinead? Do you know when you're going to start thinking about finding those providers? What's the next piece of work to be done?
Well, I mean, Alan's on one of the working groups. The working groups are really getting, and Alan, jump in at any point, are really getting into the detail now. We're looking at a number of different areas because we talked at the beginning of this session about all the work that's gone into trying to find the right mechanisms to make this a success in the long term. But we also want to be very evidence-based, and we want to be very inclusive of industry and broadcasters and independent production companies. So now it's kind of getting into the detail of what is it we need, what's going to be the most impactful, what can we do in year one and what can we do in year two. So Channel 4 and the BBC are putting some transition funding in to make sure that we can start training right away. But really the fund won't reach its full fruition, if you like, for another couple of years. I mean, Alan, do you want to say anything about the working groups?
It's very early days, Sinead. They're literally kicking off now, and I think we're all very open-minded about who does the provision, as long as it works. Was it the Chinese president say that, I don't care if a cat is white or black as long as it can catch mice? And I think that's the way we have to look at it.
So do you know how many working groups there are yet? Because Alan, you're looking at craft and tech in particular. So is that the full panoply of craft and tech skills?
Yes, it's everything. And as I say, it's such early days. We're yet to have a full session with the full committee to do it. So that it's because obviously today is the launch day. So I mean, Sam and Sinead have done a lot more work on the background to this than I have so far. It's all forward looking for our group.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's the sort of the stage that kind of we're at now on launch day is the sort of all the work we've done over the past 3 years to sort of identify where we think the skill shortages are. So like craft and tech and all the other ones, kind of it's like, so we've got ideas around that, but obviously as we widen it out to kind of the full-on working groups and have representation again from all nations, regions, indies, broadcasters, actually we can sort of really drill down into kind of what exactly is needed, how that money is best spent. And I think the beauty of that is to obviously there'll be a framework, and apologies Sinead if I'm sort of cutting in here on your territory, but I think what we've always looked at it as sort of having a framework of knowing what we want to provide, but also being really nimble around kind of reacting to things. So when we started 3 years ago, we hadn't heard of this thing called COVID, and we hadn't gone into lockdown and hadn't experienced a global pandemic. So actually, I think the work we did probably 3 years ago is very different to the body of work we'll be doing now, because we can be more reactive to that, and kind of and where are the particular skill shortages kind of now that weren't there then. So so we want to be able to be responsive to the industry all the time, so that we really are always delivering the body of work that we all need.
Great. So I'm going to throw thank you Sam. I'm going to throw a question to the audience actually about to help you with some of that thinking going forward, just as you're right at the beginning of these working groups. Where do you think the people in the audience that are in the nations and regions, where do they think the skills gaps are and skill shortages, and see if we get some questions from the audience. There's one here which says, will you train, can you swap from being a PC to being an AP? Do you think you can change and go from one side of the industry to the other?
I think anything's possible. I think we should just be really open-minded, and I think I think we've seen that. I've seen that over the last year and a half, that kind of we're looking at things really differently, and I think absolutely, going back to the point earlier about where we're lacking in production management, because not many people want to go into it. It's kind of like, well, yeah, if an AP wants to be a PC, or if a PC wants to be an AP, then yeah, let's. I think I think that, you know, kind of the way the world is now and is changing is like those, you know, all the skills that you can learn and harbor and use are going to be incredibly useful moving forward. So, you know, kind of why not be, you know, have those transferable skills and move them over. I think a lot of the time it's sort of where your heart is, isn't it, and what you're really interested in. That's when you do an amazing job. So, you know, if you're a coordinator on a, you know, a game show, but actually you're desperate to make a serious doc about something that you're really passionate about, then you'll probably make an amazing AP on that, because that's where your heart lies. So again, I mean, I'm all for being really open-minded.
But also, I think it's the level of skills that we now expect and will expect in the future are different. So a researcher maybe 20 years ago was somebody who was good on the telephone at talking to people. Now you'd expect them to be able to design a brilliant deck, to go out and be a self-shooter and maybe edit a sizzle or a casting tape. So that's a really, really big change in the last few years, I think. And so people should be skilling all the time, I think, as well as being able to, and that lets you, if you've got those skills, shift around in between companies and also between jobs.
And Alan, you just have a few minutes talking about actually new jobs, really, and new roles, because you said this right at the beginning, didn't you, about the skill level, about being able to edit in a different way, to be slightly more innovative. You know, so it's not just simply the traditional routes into the industry. You're thinking about it. It's a different skill set in some of these things now, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And a new skill set, and one that slightly terrifies me, I have to say, when I see what some of these people can do, and they're asking me to judge the quality of their work, which you feel such a fraud, you know. I mean, how people will shoot edit on their phones is just, you know, that's just an absolute given for people, even at entry-level jobs. And I think there's a lot of pressure, you know, to be able to be good at that.
Do you think so, Sinead? Do you think you're looking for slightly different skills as well in Channel 4, slightly different skills from you might have done 5 years ago?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with our Future 4 strategy, which is in part about diversifying our revenue, we are looking at different ways of bringing money in, and I think a big part of that is the 4 Studios team that is part of our setup in Leeds, about monetizing short form social media content and the like, and so there are a whole raft of skills there. It's been an education reading the job specs as we've advertised those roles for the Leeds team, because no longer do you need a media studies degree, if you ever did. Quite a lot of the time, the people we're attracting into these roles have been making their own content for years. They've been putting it on YouTube. They've been putting it on social platforms. They absolutely have roots into the next generation of talent on and off screen. So we're learning from them, at the risk of sounding slightly patronizing, but there's a whole raft of roles in that part of the business that Channel 4 would never have considered 5 years ago, because the industry is just moving and changing so fast. But I think that's really good. It's really interesting, because that is a way of getting fresh new talent into our sector from a wide variety of backgrounds. Quite often you've got to work quite hard to convince them to come and work with you, because with that free entrepreneurial spirit comes a, why would I want to go and work for a broadcaster? But yes, I mean, it's the skills required now are very, very different.
And might this fund actually, you know, help some of those people with those very exciting and much needed skills develop some of the more traditional skills? How you can actually flip it, really, so you can develop, you know, and keep that retention and keep that sustainability going.
Yeah, you want it to work both ways, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And apologies for I had to jump away. A very wet Labrador has just arrived back at the house, so. It's the curse of the Zoom meeting, isn't it? But no, I think you might, so somebody who's of that TikTok generation making their own stuff, you go, well, actually, we're going to teach you about compliance and balance and what you can see legally if you want to if you want to get your message out there. So yeah, there are absolutely a transfer of skills all the time.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions just before we come to the end of the session, if that's right. So, I mean, it strikes me really that this is such an exciting thing, this skills fund, because actually it's about it's not simply about retraining and about CPD. It's about how you adapt your skills. It's open to any age, I say. Got a lot of work to make this work, but it's really exciting. So, but I've got a couple of questions here. Okay, something about scripted, and I know we're not talking about scripted now, but this is from Tara, a broadcast, who says, how will unscripted compete for the skilled people you need against that area of the industry? So scripted is also looking for more talent. How will unscripted compete for the skilled people you need against that area of the industry? So how are both sides of our industry going to compete if we've got a huge skills shortage across both genre?
See, I think oh, sorry, Sam. Sorry, Sam.
No, go.
No, not at all.
I was going to say, I think we do tend to keep scripted and non-scripted quite separate. I think there are hugely transferable skills, but I think once you're in scripted, you probably don't want to come into the dark, dirty world of unscripted. Again, it's not as glamorous or as exciting. I wholly disagree with that. Obviously, I mean, a mainly unscripted company. But I think we sort of tend to sort of, to play in sort of different, kind of playgrounds. So I'm not sure, and I'm not sure currently, unscripted would ever sort of, kind of attract people from the scripted world away. I think the other way is that, kind of with the shortage in scripted, is that actually they're going to come and take some of our brilliant unscripted people in terms of, writers, story producers, and start, luring them away from us. But again, that's just, if the work's there, then, kind of people need to go and take it. And we just need to make sure we're always attracting good people into the industry and training them. And I think part of that, which is slightly detractive from the question, is, it's a bit like Sinead said about, kind of, the amazing people who are doing amazing entrepreneurial stuff with social and all that. It's like, actually, they could just go make loads of money doing that and probably have a really nice work-life balance. And I think what we need to do is we need to make television more attractive again, which is, of course, it's sexy and exciting, but it's also really like short contracts, freelance contracts. COVID comes, everyone loses their job. And actually, we had a period a few years ago when actually, kind of some of the younger generation go, well, I don't want to go and work, kind of like 17-hour days for some, little show on television, when I can actually probably go and work in the city or in advertising, get paid loads of money, get a pension, healthcare, all of that. And actually, I think what we need to do, and I really hope that the Skills Fund can help with this, is actually show that television is a career and can be a long career with a little bit more, kind of security around it. And I think that comes from training, investing in nations and regions, really opening it up. It's kind of like, there are people who do stuff on, social media, which is, kind of like, you don't need to necessarily go to university for doing that. I don't want to see Oxbridge on another bloody CV, quite frankly. I want to see people who are going to come to us with a different angle, which is going to make our content more interesting. So, hopefully, kind of with all of that, it's like, let's show everyone that it can be a career path, as opposed to dipping in and out and sometimes only working 7 months of the year because of your freelance contracts. So, so again, it's kind of like, again, let's make it attractive, let's make it a proper career.
And I would say, to answer Tara's question, the worlds of scripted and unscripted are very distinct, and certainly our scripted team and unscripted team don't tend to mingle too much. The unscripted teams do. So the popular, factual, entertainment and documentary teams all come together for the big tenders to, and to prep stuff. And they move between teams, across those genres. But scripted to unscripted is quite rare. Apart from, obviously, when you see the success of shows like Des, the scripted team are going, if you get any great factual stories, we can steal and make either as factual dramas or use as the inspirational for a new story, for a new fictional story. You do see that a lot.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that we need to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more collaborative, a little bit more innovative in mixing between genres and sort of the wonderful world of YouTube and the fantastic content that's made outside of the narrow boundaries of the television industry. So it really is a change to shape things up in a huge way, actually. Isn't it? It's very, I mean, it sounds incredibly exciting from what you've been saying. So we are going to hold you to all this. Now, we've only got a few more minutes before we finish. I just want to quickly make sure that everybody in the audience can see the links in the chat to the open sessions coming up with Screen Skills in the next few weeks, when they can actually, people can find out a little bit more about the granular detail of how this fund is going to work. But just before we come to an end, you've thrown out a huge challenge to yourselves about what this fund is going to achieve. What does success look like for you, Sinead? Very quickly, 30 seconds before we end.
It looks like us hitting our 50% outside of London spend by 2023, with returnable business coming from the nations and regions, brilliant people working on all the productions, them all being commercially and creatively successful, and everyone feeling they're having fulfilling careers in the places that they choose to live.
I'm just going to take a pause when I absorb that. Fantastic. Sam, Alan, is there anything else to say to that? Because that looks like an amazing success.
I couldn't agree more. You should be able to do what you want and live where you want, and that would be a measure of success.
And I would say that when you walk into an office, a studio, a location, you need to see a group of people who either look like you, come from your background, identify with you. It needs to be, you know, kind of absolutely an open workplace. And I'm going to hold Sinead to sexing up production management.
I'm really going to regret that, aren't I?
Great. Well, I think we'll hold you to, I'll hold to all of you. We'll come back in a year's time, in 18 months' time, and see how you're getting on. How about that? We do need to draw it to a close. Thank you very much for your time. Sinead Rocks, the new chair of the steering committee of the Unscripted Skills Fund. Alan Clements, who's going to be working on craft and tech and one of the working groups, and Sam, who's also on the steering committee too. Oh, that's just some very nice thanks from the audience saying thank you very much and very helpful. So thank you very much. Enjoy the sunshine. Nice to see you all and good luck.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.